What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the eCommerce Influence Podcast. My name is Austin Brawner, and I am so excited to bring you this episode with Matt Bertulli. He is the CMO of Pela. Pela.earth is their website, and I actually stumbled across Matt on Twitter when his video for a device called Lomi that he posted on Kickstarter went completely viral. It's one of the coolest things I've seen. It takes food waste and turns it into dirt. And it does that in less than 24 hours. It literally seemed like too good to be true. And I kind of followed Matt there, and I was like interested in some of the stuff he's been doing. And they're making big moves. We're talking like moonshot company. He has built an agency to over 100 people, sold it, and then started Pela, which is a phone case company with compostable phone cases. And then he's again reinvented, and they launched Lomi, which is a kitchen composter. So doing massive things. He's got plenty of wisdom. This is an excellent episode with somebody who is really out there and in the arena building things. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here. This is going to be fun.
I am super excited to chat with you. It's been kind of a long time coming. I think the first time that I saw you was on Twitter. You'd posted about a Kickstarter campaign that you were running for something called Lomi, which I'm excited for you to describe. And I saw it and I was like, wow, this guy is doing some really interesting things here. And making some big dent in waste issues. And so I followed along, and now we're here. So why don't we kick it off? I'd love to hear a little bit about this. Just start with Lomi and Kickstarter and what it was, because that went kind of viral for you, and I think it's a good place to kick it off.
Yeah, it's we've been working on this product for about 3 years. When we actually launched like a crowdfund campaign, a lot of people were surprised because we're venture-backed, right? So it wasn't like we need to go raise some money to launch this product. For us, it was very much this is a marketing exercise. Let's see if we can break into a completely different audience from what we're used to serving as Pilo, right? Because we've got other products and we've been around for years. So, when it came time to launch this thing, we had done a ton of pre-marketing, getting ready for the launch. When you see a big crowdfunding campaign, that is usually the hallmark is somebody spent a lot of money leading up to it, right? It's not we're really surprised. Look how many people are involved. It's not, it's there's so much pre-marketing.
It used to maybe be a little bit more like that, and it's
totally
not.
Yeah. And so we knew it would do well. I think what you probably saw on Twitter was where we got surprised was how fast. I think we did $1 million in under an hour.
Yeah. So for people who are listening, what is it?
Lomi. Yeah. It's a completely new kind of kitchen appliance. And it's simple. It turns organic waste into dirt while you sleep.
It's very cool. And when I saw it, I watched the video. I'm like, this cannot be real.
Yeah, I know.
How? So because we're here in Austin, Texas. We've got a compost program, and that was new about 2, maybe 3 years ago, and it's been awesome. Mm-hmm. We've got those little bags we put our compost in, and I was like, okay, so how does it go and turn? Because composting usually takes a while.
6 months.
6 months. How does it actually work, and how did you stumble across this, or was this how did you come up with it?
Okay, so I'll give there's two parts to that, right? So how we came up with it. So we're largely an R&D material science company. We've been around for about 10 years. Jeremy that founded it. I was the first outside investor about 5 years ago. So our background is actually in compostable plastics.
Yeah.
Right. So plant-based alternatives to traditional plastic. And what we learned early on was there's nowhere for these this new generation of plastics to go, but the whole world is moving to them. So even those little green bin programs you're talking about where they'll pick up food, they won't take in compostable plastics. They'll filter that stuff out because it's disruptive to the business model of compost facilities.
You're talking about the little green plastic bags that are compostable.
Totally. Yeah.
Yes.
So we started working on Lomi to solve for a lack of global infrastructure, waste management infrastructure for compostable plastics. That's what we originally started, like sort of the engineering and the R&D on Lomi was for that problem. Now, by doing that, it's much harder to break down those types of materials than it is food.
Sure.
So when we solved for the compostable plastics, like our phone cases, right, we immediately, by default, did something really great with food waste. So to answer the other part of your question, which is like, how do you go from 6 months to like under a day?
Yeah.
What we learned was, so 6 months would be, okay, that's how long it's going to take in a good compost to make what's called mature compost, right? We're not trying to actually make mature compost. So we try to get the process to about 80% of the way. You know, it's one of these things where like in under a day using like, so the machine has a bunch of sensors and software. It's using all the elements of compost. So like heat, abrasion, oxygen, humidity. We have little bacteria pods that you add in to add in like the healthy organisms you need to break food down. We have all those things. We're just taking it 80% of the way there. So the dirt that comes out of Lomi, when you put that into existing soil garden beds, it will finish off the process out in nature.
Super interesting.
Yeah. So we just tried to make it incredibly convenient for people.
So you can take it and you can go drop it in and your backyard.
Totally.
And then nature takes care of the rest.
Yes. You can put it in the little green bin program you have too. It just like, you know, so the big promise of Lomi is like food waste is gross. Nobody likes it. You know, we're actually selling the most of these things in places that have those little green bag programs because it turns out that nobody likes those things.
That is surprising to me.
I know.
That is actually surprising. Is that, do you think it has more to do with awareness around compost?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think it's like people, you know, they were sort of forced to use these things, particularly in places like California, right?
Yeah.
So they've now been trained to think about food as like, I need to separate out this waste from the rest of my waste. Most of America doesn't do this, right? No. But in places where they do, Lomi has done incredibly well because everybody's conditioned. And then, you know, being the good consumers that we are here in America, this is a way more convenient way to deal with food waste.
For sure.
Yeah.
I will say I don't know what the best way to describe it, red pilled on food waste, watching Wasted.
Yes. Yeah.
Which was, I think I went to a showing here in Austin, Texas, and part of it was because I was interested in Anthony Bourdain is like one of my personal heroes and wanted to go see something that he created. And I watched that documentary and I walked out of there and it was like an instant change, right? Yeah. It was a realization that, oh, wow, we can be doing some very simple things related to our food waste that have massive impacts. And and then it just so happened that the person who started the green bin program was at the showing.
Oh, no kidding.
It was like a whole thing. It was very cool. It was like a community event where you go watch it. And then she kind of gave a talk about these green bins that were coming. They showed up like a month later and it made it very, very easy. So when I saw it, I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense for a problem that I understand that needs to be solved. What is the biggest challenge that you face right now on the education side to help people understand what type of a problem food waste is and why they should care about it?
You want to know there's a lot of challenges. I'll give you one of the most ridiculous ones that we run into. And it has to do with our good friends over at Facebook. I can't talk about it.
You can't talk about it.
So in order to talk about, so you know this because you've watched this movie and you've got kind of like taken the red pill, right? For people who are listening, food waste going to landfill, landfills are what's called anaerobic environments. So they're starved of oxygen because we don't do like open pit, natural landfills. We layer landfills. That's how and the more that we stack them up and layer them with dirt, the more oxygen deprived waste is. And when you take organic stuff and you starve it of oxygen, it produces this thing called methane. And for people who are listening, methane would be the equivalent of like lighter fluid on a fire. So if CO2 is the fire, so nobody likes carbon up in the atmosphere, methane would be like 80 times worse. Okay, so it's really, really
Yeah,
bad.
really bad.
Really bad. So all that said, Facebook has deemed anything to do with climate political and therefore very difficult to advertise any kind of content on this subject, right?
Interesting.
That's one problem. There's
Yeah.
many more, right? Like, one of the biggest challenges with anything related to climate, I talk about this a lot, is people in climate action are very bad storytellers. Like they don't do a great job of relating to the individual. And you've got a bunch of players out in the world, usually oil and gas companies, who do a really good job of storytelling. So the industry that we're in, like we're trying to use e-commerce and D2C and retail and like these distribution channels that we're all familiar with to get people into the conversation and motivated and like want to participate. It's tough to do that because there's just not a lot of great storytelling on the whole subject.
Is that true? I feel like intentions. Let's put it back to the people who I think are the best storytellers in the space.
Yes.
Right. And I think that comes from like vegan organizations.
Yes.
They tend to do a very good job of storytelling. I don't necessarily think that the outcome that they want is the outcome that we want for our earth, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think the power of the storytelling that they do is insane. And they've been able to create through like documentaries that get highly leveraged. It's interesting. I don't know why it stops there, right? Like there's like divisions between like we're kind of all on the same side, and then it's all divided up into method.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. Chris Sacco was on Twitter talking about this, like the green on green hate
Violence
kind of has to stop, right? Like and I'm with that. We're big believers in progress over perfection.
Yeah.
Like that's in building momentum. I think you were going to hit on this. Like my belief is that people fundamentally actually want to help, and like people are inherently good. I think what it is that it's we have a lot of learned helplessness in society, particularly around climate, as in like, what can I even do to have an impact? Because the reality is like, there's not a lot.
Yes.
Climate mostly is a systems, like large systems problem. The thing that people can do is influence those, like the systems change, right? So like, and this is the really like the thing that we're super excited about with Lomi is it gets people involved. It's very easy to get involved. And my hope is that it's a momentum builder and to get people to do even more. And like the best thing that anybody can do is just be loud about it. And that's like we joke about vegans all the time. So my wife's a vegan, right? And like the big joke with vegans is how do you know somebody's a vegan? They tell you.
I tell you.
So like I'd love to get to that point with Lomi where it's people just naturally tell you about it. 'Cause number one, it's a surprising thing when the first time you use it to see like food go to dirt blows people away.
Sure. It was not shocking to me when I saw the video and I was like, okay, this is exploding on social media because of you put incredible amounts of work into it and it was filmed in a way that described it with good storytelling.
Yeah.
But it's like a word of mouth product.
It's insane. So that video, the hero video for this thing, and now obviously like we're running paid behind it, not a lot. I think it's been seen 50 million times.
Wow.
Like we're like into the like healthy, I think like 3-4 million people that have watched the whole thing. Like,
and this is your point about
minutes.
people wanting to help, right? It's like,
this is it.
You're on it. Like people want to be able to have, want to be able to make an impact, but this learned helplessness that you're talking about. So what can people actually do? Like what is actually effective?
I mean, there's so many things this is why so my number one is waste, waste, right? It's the thing that, I'm sure you've heard like some version of the death and taxes joke, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah, something like that, right?
The only thing in life is certain is death and taxes. Yeah.
Right. Which is actually not true. Yeah. There's a lot of people who don't pay any taxes.
Yeah.
But everybody produces waste.
Yeah.
So our running joke as a company is like, it's actually death and garbage. And for us, our point of view for this like new category that we're building is that garbage is optional, right? It's just that modern society got away from this. So like at some point in our history, waste had value. Like pre-industrialization, all waste had value. We used it. We put it back in the earth. Like we didn't throw away as much as we do now. So my belief is that we can unlock the value of waste, and that waste is actually a better thing for individuals to focus on than carbon footprint. Right? Like the idea of a personal carbon footprint was created by an oil company. I think it was BP, to pass the buck. And they ran PR, really effective PR for a long time to get people to believe that it was a them problem, not a systems problem.
Yeah.
So what we've come to now, and I don't know about your social circle, but like even in the work I do in my social circle, nobody understands carbon. Like this is not something that we wake up with and deal with.
It's not tangible.
I don't touch it in a day. I'm pretty sure you don't.
Yeah.
It's not on my skin. It's not in my garbage can. So this is why I love waste, is I think it's so tactile and real, and that you can rally around it, and people don't like it. The other thing that we talk about a lot internally and even in our marketing is, look, so we've actually, like individually, a lot of us have been held hostage by it without even knowing it. We just go through the motions with garbage.
Yeah.
It's like it collects. I take it out every week. Sometimes it smells worse than other times. And this is just part of our life. And our big aha with Lomi was, well, what if garbage didn't have to be so crappy of an experience?
Yeah.
And what if it's the place that for people, like we can actually rally around garbage and waste and show people that like, this is the thing that you can individually do that will have meaningful impact when you take like the sum of all of our parts.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that was one of the more impactful parts of the movie, Wasted. And if you're listening and you haven't watched this movie, it's about mostly food waste, really, is what it is, about the entire movie. And there's a part where I think that they're in Korea and they go to an apartment complex, and there's a level where you can kind of see how much food waste, and everybody's kind of being tracked.
Yeah.
And when you compare the amount of food waste per person there to the amount in America, I can't remember the number.
It's pretty shocking.
It's absolutely shocking.
Yeah.
It's like 100 or 1,000 times more here per person, something on that magnitude, which is wild.
Just Thanksgiving, right? Coming up is, I think it's about $240 million worth of food will be wasted just on like one day in America. Canada, where I am, is no better, by the way. Like we're the same in this regard. Yeah. We over consume on food, and the way that we treat food is just awful. Like what you're talking, it's such an important piece, and good on Bourdain for doing it. Like that's like it's such a great thing. I agree. I think everybody should watch it. It'll get you thinking.
So when you're talking a little bit about like, I don't know, green on green fighting or infighting and those sorts of things, I think it's interesting because there are a lot of arguments that when you say like, oh, there's just not that much we can do because, okay, a lot of the pollution and stuff comes from corporations. Yep. There's like the Coke idea of like, well, if we ban stuff that's dirty in the US, it's going to go somewhere else and be dirtier.
Right.
Like, what do you think about that? What's your take on some of the ideas around like, okay, there's so little we can do as individuals besides obviously waste. Yep. Are we totally screwed? How do you feel?
No, not at all. And I don't think there's nothing that individuals can do. I just think that a lot of the stuff is harder to ask them to do as a first step.
Yeah.
Right. Like, telling somebody to run out and buy a Tesla over a gas car is a fairly substantial ask for a lot of people.
And is it even effective, right? There's a lot of people that talk about like the minerals that are being stripped for batteries.
Yeah, it's a complex subject.
Yeah.
And this is like I spend a lot of time on writing and communication just in my role, right? This is where like that whole storytelling thing becomes really powerful because everything climate is complex. There isn't one thing that has to happen. There's hundreds of things that have to happen. And because of that, we need great storytelling to create leverage because that's the only way that we take complex things and we simplify them for folks. So, on the whole, like electric cars better than like gas cars. The nuance is like over what period of time. It's not out of the gate. It's like probably after 3 years. But it's a very expensive first step for most folks. things that people can do though is like there's going to be a big push over the next decade to go to electric appliances over gas, mostly because the grid is going to get greenified. Like it's absolutely going to go that way. Like there's enough money attacking renewable energy. There's a big debate around nuclear and whatever. Like, so there's so many of these little things where like, that's what we joke about, and is like this green on green hate is like, are you pro nuclear or are you anti? And solar.
Well, nuclear is
like,
a very interesting one
things.
because it seems like I grew up forever with this idea that it's like the most dangerous, the worst thing. It's not. And then it's swinging back, right? And it feels like there actually could be some common, a real commonality here, where some of the people that are far on the green spectrum, and then also people who are on like the energy security system, could align here.
Absolutely.
What is holding us back there? It's very interesting to me.
This, I believe, so like, I'm a good capitalist, and I think that companies will actually go where consumer demand is. So the more businesses, like nothing would make me happier than to see like thousands of entrepreneurs building Pilo-like companies or Patagonia-like companies, right? Because that will educate and build a larger consumer base that's going to demand better from all companies. We're seeing this, right? You want a really pointed example of what's happening is in packaging. So, I mean, especially during COVID, e-commerce packaging became the bane of people's existence.
Yes.
Like my garage is full of boxes and like the shit that shows, it's crazy how much I have. And I'm pretty conscious about it, So packaging, there's all kinds of new packaging companies that are making compostable packaging, right? Like that would actually work in a Lomi, for example.
Sure.
So imagine like if the entire, like if a Shopify was to turn around and say, this new 3PL infrastructure we're building, there's no plastic in the entire system.
It'd be huge. No styrofoam.
No styrofoam, no peanuts. They go fully paper and or compostable plastics. And that's the new standard, right? That will create momentum in the network. And more businesses will realize that customers are actually, this is what they want. They don't want all the packaging. I read something the other day that really hit home with me, which is like when we go online and we buy something, we're never buying packaging.
No, we're not.
It's just kind of, it's forced on us. There's this but again, another debate topic is like the value of the unboxing experience, particularly when you're like trying to create UGC. It's really important. So like there's a balance for brands. Like you want to create that really great unboxing experience, but you also 2 days later, you don't want that customer thinking like, oh my God, look how much crap they sent me.
Yes.
Because that's happening. So, that like to me, it's the one thing, it's one example, and there's so many more where consumers are actually in charge of a lot of this. And but you have to think of it like our dollars are votes, and that everything we spend our dollars on is a vote for how we want the world to look. Sure.
Well, I think it's also, we are in charge, but one of the challenges is not having the information.
Yes.
And I look at airlines, right? And so there's over a period of 20 years, the experience on an airline has just consistently degraded into smaller chairs, less comfortable, no TVs. Now you're lucky, if they let you take your mask off for 15 seconds to take in between bites of food, right? But what's interesting is there's a big argument that it's not actually consumer demand that has made that happen. The reason that it's happened is because of search engines that you can sort by price.
Yes.
And you can't determine the difference between, let's say, a Delta, which is a better experience, than like a United Airlines, really, until you've already booked it, right?
Yep.
And you're there.
And you've flown.
And you're like, oh, okay, I remember this experience was actually better. And I feel like the same problem comes down with the way that we shop, in the sense that you don't have an idea. You can look and you can see, I was searching for Christmas presents, and one of the things that I was buying was something for my mom, which was like a ceramic coffee pour over. could buy it from 15 different places. No idea how they box it and ship it to me.
Yeah, I think this is where I actually think, again, Shopify could do some real damage.
Yes.
Is like, what if we made it easy?
Like visibility into what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, this is something that we're working on with Lomi is we're going to announce it. I don't know when this episode is going to air, but we're going to announce it in the next few weeks. But we've already signed partnership agreements with a number of packaging companies that are actually going to put a Lomi approved stamp on the bottom of their packaging. Right. So when you get it from a grocery store, it shows up at your house, the consumer knows like that can go in Lomi. But what we're also doing is we want these companies to put this stuff on the brand sites that that this packaging is better. And then let the customer
can compost it at home.
Yeah. But there's more than that. It's like brands could easily say like and a lot of them do, right? We'll say like there's no plastic in our packaging. Which too, there's a whole cohort of customers and they're big. Like Pela, we have more than 1 million consumers in our D2C business, right?
Yeah.
That's what they value. Like we have no pack. Even Lomi, which is like an appliance, it's got electronics. It's the packaging that wraps Lomi when you get it. So there's a box, which is paper, which is the most recycled material in the world. I think it's like 70% of all paper product gets recycled. And then the bags, like the plastic wrap of the machine itself, it can go in Lomi.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? So like I think for brands, there's a lot that you can do right now that would be quite differentiated, whereas in 5 years it's going to be normal and you're going to have missed the opportunity to go out and use it as a wedge in whatever category you're in, right? Makeup, personal care, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I think it also might work even more in like commoditized than non-commoditized areas where you're like,
absolutely.
That's how I said, we'll talk about what you're doing at Pela. You guys have grown and taking it one step back, when I was doing some research, owned or worked at an agency for quite some time before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sold that to private equity. So I was a super early Shopify Plus partner in Toronto. Before that, a Magento partner. So like I had that agency
back in the old school e-commerce days.
Yeah, like 10, 11 years. So I started that in 2008, sold it in 2018 to basically like transition over to Pela full time.
Sure.
Because Pela was, at that time, we were just a compostable phone case. So we like created a completely new category in mobile accessories around no waste. And that just blew up. And that's a really
Did it take off in
business.
A similar way to Lomi, where it was like somebody sees it in a viral sense, or was it more of a slow growth?
It was way more it was slow until it wasn't. It was like, we would sell like a case a day when I first invested in the company, and then 1 month it just like it went insane. So and in the course of 3 months we went from, I think 1 month we did $5,000 in sales. 3 months later we did $85,000 in sales.
Wow.
And then it just like, and it just, up into the multi-8 figures, super fast, right? Like once people knew it was an option and they understood how it worked, like it went a little nuts really, really quickly. So Lomi is a little different in that it quite literally came out of the gate, a like multi-8 figure business on its way to a 9-figure business with little effort. Yeah. Because it's a different thing now. It's like, it's very mind blowing for people when they learn about it. So it's a viral sensation in a whole different way.
How was the transition? So you said you were venture-backed.
Yes.
And when did you raise money? When did you go about that?
About 3 years ago. So when we wanted to start development on Lomi, we went out and raised capital. So like myself and one of my partners, Brad, we've both built and sold companies. So we didn't necessarily need money. Business was profitable and we could have kept going that way. But we saw like it's like for us, we might be completely wrong and we're cool with that, but like we thought this might actually be an opportunity to build a world-beating company if we like by focusing on this challenge of waste.
Sure.
Right. And that was what we went out to investors with. And we met, our lead investor in our Series A was Jay-Z and Jay Brown at Marcy Venture Partners. That took 10 minutes. Like those guys saw it right away.
Yeah.
They were yes. Like, that was an instant yes, let's do this. And we love, they're great. So we just met a few people that could kind of see that like, this is where culture's going. And if Pela can be create a set of meaningful solutions in solving for waste, there's a very big category there, right? Like most people don't know this, like waste management's a $2.5 trillion a year category. Like
recession proof as well.
It's wildly recession proof. Everybody throws stuff away. So it's, our bet is that consumers are going to get more and more aware, and we're going to help that along. Obviously, that's the job of our marketing, and that there's a big category here. So we raised money because we thought, like as bootstrappers historically, we thought this is something that is deserving of raising venture capital. Whereas I'm a believer, not everything is.
Sure. How did you feel after you got the first check? Well, was your first meeting success? Was the first meeting like 10 minutes? All right. Or did you have to push for it for a while?
No, it was an instant yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we called another friend who made the intro, basically wrote the other check, and we were done. It was fast. That's not normal. No. But
again, back to the point of having a very differentiated idea.
Yeah.
And when a lot of the success, again, we talked about the Kickstarter working all the way back. It's like years of work to get to that level of growth that quickly.
And millions of dollars, right? Like I think that's when we launched that, and I was on Twitter, I'm like, wow, look at this. What people didn't see that, like we put hundreds of thousands into advertising pre-launch.
Interesting.
Right? Like you don't see that.
Yeah. And that was advertising on Facebook pre-launch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was building hype for the launch, and then it was like using existing, like when we launched that, we had 800 and some thousand customers in Pela case. Like it was to look at it and just say that was easy. And that's how there was so many unfair advantages that we had spent years stacking, getting ready for this. And like, we're not done. Like we have other stuff that's about to happen that is like, it's substantial. Right. And the interest in it, from earned media, celebrity, there's not an A-lister that hasn't asked for one.
Sure.
Right. Like that's
because correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not in people's houses yet, is it?
No. We started shipping them this week. Like it's November 17th. We're on time too.
Do you have one at your house?
Crazy thing. I do. I've had one for about 3 months.
Yeah.
The crazy thing with most crowdfunding campaigns never ship. Or they're like years late. We waited until we were in manufacturing to even go live with this thing. I'm super obsessive over like the customer experience side of the business, and I didn't want to be one of those crowdfunding campaigns that's like promising a delivery date and then it's 2 years late. Right. So we went live and we said, look, we will be shipping these units out before the end of the year, and we're holding to that promise. We've got, I think, 45,000 Lomis that will ship before Christmas.
Wow. What is the difference for you between running a business bootstrapped and venture-backed, if anything?
Not a lot. You're always obsessing over cash flow, always, and burn rate and, other things. I think with venture-backed, you have this term called burn rate that in a bootstrap company, we just call that cash flow.
Negative cash
little
flow.
Language shift is especially like my agency, we had about 110, 120 employees when I sold it. So like service businesses are great cash machines if you run them well, right? Which is ultimately what we were part of a roll up into this bigger agency that is now called Bounteous, which is funny. It just got sold again, right? 3 years later. So, I think the key thing with venture-backed, at least from our perspective, we still run it like a bootstrap business. We're really capital efficient. So for people listening, there's all kinds of information out there on how to raise money and, how valuations and how much you should dilute. Right at this point, we've done one round and one extension of the round. And we've only sold about 20% of the company to investors. So we as founders still own 80% of this company and are still very much in control, right? And we're going to do another round here shortly. It's same idea. Like we work backwards from this very small dilution target. Are we going to get the amount we need to continue on whatever strategy, whatever we're trying to build? And that's it, right? So not a lot different. It's a little different. And when you have institutional investors, you have a board, right? You have You've always had fiduciary responsibility. Like Austin, you are an entrepreneur. You have fiduciary responsibility to you as the shareholder, right? Yep. I have fiduciary responsibility to me as the shareholder, but also other people as shareholders. That's the only mindset thing for me.
Sure. So when you're running an organization, how many people are in your organization today?
So including our manufacturing, so like all in, I think about 70.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's like we have probably 20 in the case business. We manufacture here in British Columbia. So like there's probably 20 people there, like making and decorating all the various phone cases, like it's basically a just-in-time business. So as it's sold, we make it and ship it.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's the most challenging thing about running your business?
This kind?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, we'll ask two-part. One, what was the most challenging about running the agency? And then switch it to this business today.
Okay, so client services is a way different animal. We were very upmarket, like enterprise type clients. So like I had governments as clients, and like Staples Canada was a client. So big enterprise stuff. The biggest challenge there is like how much work just goes into managing the relationships versus doing actual work. Like that was always a struggle for me. Like I'm a software engineer by trade. I like to build stuff. I don't like to talk to people all day. So that, and then, cash management and cash flow in an agency, particularly when you're growing it, there's upper bounds to how fast you can grow before you start breaking cash flow very easily, right?
Sure.
Project work versus retainers. Like there's so much nuance in agency. Product is not a cash machine. They eat cash. Like buying inventory, is by far like cash management in a product company for me is way more difficult than services. Biggest part of that is inventory for sure. Right. And cash conversion cycle as a result of inventory. So I would say like anybody looking at the two models, it's all going to come down to cash, and product companies are, in my experience, more difficult to scale from a cash perspective. Unless you're like one of these super rare companies that has just got like wild margins and recurring opportunity, like good LTV and wild margins with no competition, and your CAC can be stupid low. And like they exist, man. You've had some of these people on the show, like, and I know these guys. Yeah. They do exist. They're just really rare.
And they only exist for a short window. It's like because people pour into that type of when you see success, it's very easy to like, okay, I'm going to fast follow this. And
oh man,
but often, it always
we have already. Wow.
What's that?
The knockoffs on Lomi we already. It's hilarious, and I know they're not real, and they're still trying.
Yeah.
It's a thing. Yeah.
Well, almost all those businesses, when it comes down to it, have something similar to what you're talking about. Advantages stacked on top of each other, whether it's 10 years in an industry where they were adjacent to something that blew up, and then they already have the skills to transfer it in, a large customer list, early action on, organic social stuff like that.
God. Infrastructure.
Yeah.
We're talking to new investors now, and they're like, what's the benefit of the case business to the Lomi product line? And I'm like, I don't know, like customer service is completely ramped up. Yeah. I have multiple 3PLs globally, including our own warehouses that we can use.
Yeah.
I have an office in Hong Kong. So when it comes time to like QA, QC and make sure that we can move product out of China when most people can't, I can. So like all this plumbing, it was in place that is allowing us to take Lomi from launch to massive scale in a calendar window that is not possible. I don't have to spend 9-12 months hiring that team. It's in place. I just need to shift their focus. So that is a wildly different set of variables than like you have a cool idea or a great product. Let's just say you have an amazing product, but you're starting from zero, we're way out ahead of that person, like who's got the exact same thing as we do. So like even fast followers, I'm not super worried about them. Like there's two of those, right? There's either going to be the entrepreneur who wants to just pile in and has nothing, or it's going to be a large multinational, multi-billion-dollar company who's going to try and steer their Titanic towards us. Like I'll
Much
fight
more
those two guys all day.
very challenging.
Yeah. Plus, our view is, it'll actually be kind of great if there's a whole bunch of Lomis out there.
Yeah.
Like that'll create the market that we think we think this is like really, really substantial. This concept of decentralizing waste management, it's big and it's bold, which is the other hard part of building this kind of company is like when you genuinely have a moonshot, as in this can be in every home, right? Like every house has a dishwasher. We don't think about the path that it took for every house to have a dishwasher. We just have them and we can't imagine our life without them.
Sure.
So every house will have a Lomi. It may just not be made by us.
Yeah.
But can we build the platform that connects them all, right? Like that's the idea here is like we want to be the connective tissue and the software and the data and, the community and the standard and all those things. So moonshots are hard in that sense. Like when you go out to the future and you think of how big that future, or how not big, let's just say different than it is today. You now have to come back to reality. Like I just finished 2 days of leadership planning with my team, like annual planning with my leadership team. And now I had to come back to reality from 3 years in the future. And I got to try and put this into English and not make people's heads melt. Like
sure.
Just like keep them all motivated that, what we're building right now may not even be around in 3 years. Like it might be a new thing. So there's a lot of challenges with communication when you're doing this kind of thing.
How much time do you live in the future versus being in the present?
I would say like 30 to 50% of my time is way out in the future.
Yeah.
Like what's happening right now, it was baked a long time ago and I don't really think about it. I have to deal with it, good or bad. Like I've got, I'll go to a board meeting next week and talk about it. But, for the most part, like the way, at least for me, because the style of like, I'm more of a creative person than I am an operational person. So I do really well if I have lots of free space to be creative. A lot of what we do just like comes out of my head sometime. Like it just spend enough time on a problem, researching and writing and thinking. And like the thinking about thinking is so important when you're doing this kind of work. I try to spend them, if I would spend all my time there if I could.
Sure.
So the kind of company I build, I create team and structure under me and around me that allows for that work to happen. Whereas like my business partner, Brad, he's a driven operations kind of guy. Very different
like
needs for him.
Each day.
Yeah. And like Jeremy, who's the founder of the company, like he's a inventor kind of guy. Like he just wants to tinker and try, and he's like obsessed with sustainability. And, that's why he's in charge of all of everything sustainability for us, like our own carbon footprint, all of it. That's Jeremy. So we have like the partners in the business are all very complementary, right? But this is it. It's like, being self-aware and knowing the kind of help and team that you're going to need. That's why it's like, it's very difficult to follow. Even what I'm saying, somebody listening to this should just be like, yeah, he's full of shit and I shouldn't listen to him. Like that should actually be the response. Unless you think you're exactly like me, my way of doing things is not going to work.
Sure. Well, I think it's interesting to me because I think I'm more like you in the sense that I need some space to be able to create things, and this, the podcast is a creative outlet for me in a sense that I can take some time and get new ideas. And if there's any control over that, it makes it hard for me to want to do it. I'm like, no, I'm out. If it's
you totally like think like what I love about what you do, this particular medium of podcasts and talking to people is you get to go really wide in the conversations and the topics to explore. And then you can figure out how to apply that to whatever narrow niche that you want to like go and create leverage in. So it's like, it's a really, for if people don't know that, like that's a really great way to learn.
Oh, it's a great way to learn.
To create content
it's the best. It's the best way to learn for me, at least.
Yeah,
I can kind of talk about it and then share different stories. Well, on your journey, what are some resources or things that you have found to be valuable? Because you mentioned like people should not listen to you unless they feel like they're exactly like you are.
Yeah.
But also your business is larger now. But at some point it was not.
Yeah.
When you were smaller on this journey, what are some of your big kind of resources that have been helpful for you?
I've got a set of principles that I live by. So like one of them is for my friend Jason Gaynard, who runs this organization called Mastermind Talks.
Yeah, no, Mastermind Talks. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jason's always hammered into our heads that like your network is your net worth. So I invest very heavily into my network. There's massive leverage there, so I think, and they're the best people to learn from. Right?
And when you say invest, what does that mean?
I will spend money on masterminds and go to conferences and
Sure.
Time, right? The most precious resource we all have is time. So I will put time into those relationships because I know that at some point, you never know what you're going to need on this journey, right? And so far, everything I've needed has come from my network, everything. As the kind of company we're building at Pela, I learn a lot about climate, and I also spend even more time working on sort of like what I'll call marketing, right? Or D2C or whatever you want to call it. And that just usually comes down to like psychology and human behavior and like really trying to understand like what makes people tick and how do we use all the same levers that it would be to build any great brand? Can we bring that over to this thing we call Pela and Lomi and whatever else and create impact with it? Like I studied all of the guys that sell health and like supplements.
Yeah.
Like they're the best marketers on the internet. Like them and porn, like they're so good at it, right?
Yeah.
So I go study them to learn how to go sell my magic dirt machine.
Yeah. I think that's also, that's something that is lacking from the climate change industry is like maybe even like a level of arrogance or superiority being like, well, we're not going to go down this path, or we're looking at like these people who are selling crazy stuff, right? Like supplements or whatever, and being like, we can do it better. But at the end of the day, like humans are wired the same way, and the same stories that connect with people related to weight loss, sex,
all of it.
All those things have to be the same things. They're going to have to connect with people around changing their behavior and saving the earth and all these different things.
Yeah. Like what you're nailing the entire thesis for our company.
Yeah.
Like that is it. It's that if we used all the same strategies and tools and tactics that those companies do, but we direct it towards climate action, what happens? Because just screaming at people like vegans did for so long.
Yeah, or telling them they're bad, right?
Yeah.
I had one of the wildest experiences. I was in Santa Barbara visiting. My parents were there for summer, and I went down and I went to a YMCA, and it's like a big pool. Everyone's swimming. There was like some fountains and stuff. And I was walking into the showers, and on the way there was a woman complaining to her friend that somebody had taken a long shower, like over a minute shower.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, we're in a pool, right? Like
thousands of gallons of water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, that messaging is just not going to work on a large scale where some people are going to be connecting with it, and they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to change our ways, and I'm going to make people feel bad, or I'll feel bad. So I'll do this. But at a large scale, it clearly has not worked fast enough.
Yeah. Asking people, so shaming people, I mean, that can work, right? For some people, but
it's one lever of influence.
Absolutely. And like where climate has gone wrong in it's just broad storytelling, all things climate, environmental, we're always asking people as climate activists to give things up instead of turning around and giving them solutions that they can do. Like it's always about sacrifice. And I believe that's a terrible way to market anything.
Yeah.
And like, no wonder there's not more action on some of this stuff, because all we've ever done is yell at people and tell them they need to give everything up and stop driving and stop flying and stop eating meat and pick the word stop and put it in front of a human behavior. And climate activists have been saying it for years. Yeah. Like it's terrible marketing.
It's interesting. There seems to be a little bit of a divide between like two schools of thought, and maybe I'm generalizing here. One that kind of comes from like the Bezos school of thought, like we're going to blast off Earth and live in a like very large spaceship that'll be like a wonderful place to live. Then we'll have other spaceships that are polluting. And then we'll treat Earth as a park.
Right.
Right. And I think that's actually his stated thing I've read. I like reading Jeff Bezos.
It's basically like Interstellar, but like Disneyfied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got the flip side of that, which is like, okay, we have to reduce, we have to figure out how to make this one Earth that we have sustainable.
Yes.
I feel like maybe one of the reasons why this other view has gained popularity is because it doesn't require any stopping.
Yes.
It actually requires only going harder.
Right. Yeah. And so I am somewhere I'm not in the, like, I'm definitely not in the, like, we should all go to space camp.
Yeah.
And just abandon hope. I would be more in the, like, I'd be more in the, like, there's a lot of leverage that we've yet to tap into from technology. Some technology that has been built, some of it has not been built. Right.
Yeah.
That I just believe in the human capacity for innovation and creativity. And I don't think we've even seen that light up yet. And if you spend some time and you look at the amount, as an example, spend some time and look at the amount of venture capital that's now going into climate. The jumps are multiple orders of magnitude per year. So we don't even have our best and brightest working on the problem.
Yeah.
I tweeted this the other day. Like, it hit me because just, again, I'm a software developer by trade, right? Over the last 15 years, and I'm sure you see this being in Austin, one of the most popular questions that entrepreneurs ask is like, how do I find a technical co-founder?
Yeah.
That's so common, right? I would love to see a world where entrepreneurs are asking, how do I find a scientist with a cool technology, but that scientist is a god-awful entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Because that's the reality. Right now, there's amazing science out there, and I've seen a lot of it, but holy shit, are they terrible entrepreneurs? Like, they're so bad. They don't, because that's not what they are. So like, imagine if you had the people that are working on like a new flavor or a new variation of a soft drink, and they're a level of marketer that they can build like hundreds of millions of dollar business selling a deodorant or a soft drink. What if they went and worked on it?
I think it's interesting because we're going to have to see, we have this mindset where software has created, basically an unlimited margin type product.
Yes.
And most of what's going to move in climate is not going to be that, right?
No.
It's not going to be 99% margins or something.
Oh gosh, no. Like
the
the unit economics are far, like, way different. But I mean, like, if you want to get nuts, I would, like, right now, I would be looking at the intersection of blockchain and climate.
Yeah. And when you say that, like, Klima is interesting.
Yeah. Dude, how about like, so you know what a carbon credit is? Like, we trade carbon, right?
Yeah. And to define it for people who are listening.
Well, so carbon, like, basically we want to put a price on carbon as a society, and create a mechanism or a marketplace where companies who are net positive producers of carbon, which is bad, right? That's
going to be something like ExxonMobil,
bingo,
Saudi Aramco.
In order for them to get to carbon neutral, they would need to invest in and buy carbon credits from companies who have like carbon asset infrastructure. So a good example would be, I think recently a like plot of the Amazon rainforest went public to, I forget what it's called. It's like Tree BR or something, where it's like their carbon assets are now like part of the public markets and you can buy them, right? So, but the way this is all working right now is very centralized. Like, these are governments
moving around.
And like, we all know that anything government touches never works really well. It's like the only things that are going up in price are things that are government regulated.
Yeah.
So why are we not working on like Web3-esque solutions around carbon or waste, right? Or even like did you watch this Dow thing on Sunday around buying the Constitution?
I've seen I saw a little bit on Twitter.
It was insane. Okay. Like, everybody got like, so they created a decentralized autonomous organization thing which I think is what Dow stands for, that went out and tried to buy the US Constitution. So like, if you could do that, What if all of, like, not all, but like, what if you had a bunch of really bright people who understand this new internet that we're creating? And we look at the intersection points to all of the type of climate action that we have to have and the ability for this new kind of technology to mobilize people at huge scale. Why are we not considering that?
I mean, it's very, very interesting. I've been following a little bit of this Klima launch, and I don't know exactly what it's going to end up being, if it's a Ponzi scheme or not. But the idea of buying carbon credits to drive up the market, so that it's more expensive to pollute.
Yes.
I think what's so interesting about that is it actually takes back, to call back to earlier in the podcast where we talk about why it's been so challenging when you feel like you don't have much you can do.
Yeah.
Well, if you can actually combine with other humans, create a little decentralized organization and fight back against these organizations that we haven't really been able to fight against by driving up their prices. Well, now it feels like we can do something.
Yeah.
Right.
There's immense economic power in the masses.
Yes.
It's just that we've just begun to have the technology to allow them to mobilize in that way.
Yeah.
And that's where like all of this Web3 stuff gets really interesting around climate action. And, cause like, what do we want to put influence on? What you're talking about, like carbon right now is relatively cheap. I think it's like $50 or $60 a ton. But what if it was the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah.
$60,000 for a carbon credit. Like,
it would change the behavior of these organizations that are polluting.
Yes.
And I also think one of the things that you're positioned really well in, and somebody who's listening, who's trying to build a company, maybe at an earlier stage, is that there is going to be competition for good talent. And young people, they want to work at your company.
Yes.
Fighting against the biggest problem that they're going to be facing. And they don't want to go work for one. They don't really want to work for big tech companies. I don't think anymore. I think it's the ship has sailed.
Tarnished, right?
Tarnished a little bit.
Yeah.
And then also, in a traditional place where it's like, we're not fighting against the biggest thing, because for whatever criticism around storytelling, I do think the younger generation, people that are graduating from high school now, they understand the urgency.
Yeah, they care.
A lot more.
You've heard this, like I'm sure you have, the whole Great Resignation thing in the States or in the world.
All over,
right?
yeah.
All over. I've lost one person in 12 months, right? And we just went through, again, going into annual planning. So we do this annual survey, and a lot of it is around NPS type questions, right? I think our NPS score was like in the high 80s.
Well, it's a mission based, and you've got a big vision.
Yeah, and our staff is very young.
Yeah,
lots of creatives, like new engineers, new material scientists out of school, chemists, that kind of stuff. And yeah, like a lot of them will just tell you, they'll flat out tell you, like they want to work on interesting, meaningful things.
Yeah,
and it's a great thing. So yeah, like I would encourage any entrepreneur that is looking for a field to get in, or looking for an idea on where to apply their talents, to look at climate, because you're going to have a great time recruiting.
Skate where the puck is going.
Yeah, man. It's the Canadian. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing about the Great Resignation, and we'll wrap it up here. But
sure. I
saw today an interesting thing on Twitter as well, where I get a lot of my news and information. This guy had actually gone and looked at the industries, industry by industry, how they were impacted. And his point was basically, people don't quit jobs, they quit people.
100%.
And the main industries that have been hammered by this were the ones traditionally that you feel like are where the jobs and the treatment is not the best. Construction, hospitality, service work, those are the ones that have gotten hammered, right? And absolutely. I think a lot of this anti-work movement on Reddit is very interesting because it's hyper-focused around like poor treatment of employees. And those typically, I think, those have been the industries where a lot of that's happened.
So look at the economic impact of this movement right now, which is like, we're starting to see data on it, right? It's not insignificant.
No.
And that's because of things like Reddit. So to me, this is incredibly hopeful for like when, as a society or a population, that we want to get behind something, the weight of us collectively it's pretty freaking mind blowing.
And we're going to move it from a centralized thing like Reddit to a decentralized thing
Yes.
that can't be shut down.
Right.
That's the interesting part, right?
I love it.
If we can do that and we can break free from some of the constraints of a centralized system where, it can be, as you've seen, you can't even advertise on Facebook.
Yeah.
Right.
Drives me nuts. It's like, no, that's offsite content. I'm like,
yeah.
what?
Well, and like when I go through and run through my head, I'm like, that kind of makes sense in this because it was being potentially abused by people or bad actors. But at the same time, good ideas generally win. Matt, this has been a wonderful, fun conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, man, it's been super fun.
What's the best way for people to connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah.
If they're interested, I know you're probably hiring consistently over the next
we've
while.
got like 50 roles we're adding right now. So the only platform I'm on is Twitter, and it's just my first initial and my last name, M. Bertulli.
Cool.
Company is fat. You can find us at pela.earth. That's the domain. Really
awesome.
Simple. Yep.
Matt, really, really appreciate chatting with you. We'll keep up on Twitter, and you have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks.